Tonight, chaos.
We just witnessed somebody set themselves on fire. I just saw it happen.
The Trump trial goes from sublime to crazy after a man sets himself on fire outside court.
We're very concerned. Of course, we're going to review our security protocols.
Will they sequester the jury?
This is really a concerted witch hunt. Very simple. Everything you heard in there, this is a witch hunt.
How Democrats lost control of their own silver bullet.
What you're doing to him, we find eerily relatable to things that have been done to folks in our community.
Strike back. Israel defies Biden's demand to hold their fire and hits Iran.
Why is it that you don't have any comment at this time? It's been several hours since the reported strike.
I'm not going to speak or speculate about any of the reports that are out there.
John Bolton on Israel's new role in the world.
He pulls a knife, you pull a gun. He sends one of yours to the hospital, you send one of his to the morgue.
Summer of rage. Will the pro-Hamas protests ever end?
You're what? You're Hamas?
Yes, we're all Hamas.
The new danger of terrorist sympathizers on American streets. We start with breaking news in New York as two major stories continue to develop throughout this evening. You can see the protests, the banging, the shouting at New York's police. The Trump business records case starts Monday in New York, barring an emergency order by the judge or something happening with the jury. Opening statements start 9 a.m. Monday morning. Then comes porn star Stormy Daniels, star witness, admitted perjurer Michael Cohen, and Playboy playmate Karen McDougal. We're told that it's going to be somewhere between a 6 to 8 week trial. Wonder how many times Donald Trump will fall asleep. Trump talked a few minutes ago. We'll hear from him and one of his former lawyers in a couple of minutes. But first, listen in. Pro-Hamas. So long live the Intifada, a violent uprising against Israel is one of the chants. NYPD, KKK is some of the others that we're hearing. Pro-Hamas protests across New York and Massachusetts continue to grow literally by the hour. We've watched it. The faculty at Columbia thought clearing students would end the protests. They thought wrong. It only emboldened them and has led to more protests nationwide. We've seen protesters shut down highways and bridges from Chicago to Oakland to San Francisco. And it's important to make the distinction because we started by calling these folks pro-Hamas protesters. None of them are advocating for peace. They aren't calling for a ceasefire. The folks on the streets in New York that we just see are waving the flags of terrorist organizations, and they are actively calling for the slaughter of Jews and supporting those that do. For example, here are some of them talking about the attacks of October 7th, where Hamas killed 1,200 while raping and pillaging their way through Israel.
Remember the 7th of October.
Never forget the 7th of October.
That will happen.
Never forget the 7th of October.
Not 1 more time. Not 5 more times. Not 10 more times. Not 100 more times. Not 1,000 more times.
No,
10,000 times.
You ready? 7th of October is about to be every day.
Senator Ted Cruz is with us on the Summer of Rage coming. NewsNation's Rich McHugh is on the streets of New York with these protesters. And Rich, this has been going on, what now, for 7-8 hours?
That's right, Leland. It's been growing throughout the day. Earlier this morning, it wasn't much of a crowd, but now I would say there's 300 to 400 people here. We've been here all throughout the afternoon. These protesters, you just missed it. They were chanting at the police officers, NYPD, KKK. They're also chanting things like Free Palestine, but also saying things like from the rivers to the sea, which our House of Representatives just declared this week was anti-Semitic. 2 people were arrested. I have to say, on a personal note, I went to school here decades ago. There was like hunger protests every other week, peaceful. This is not that. This is something totally different, and it seems geared towards the violence, towards the people of Israel. That's as best as I can put it. And the students we've talked to, some of them are afraid. They say it's divided all their friendship groups here, and they're on edge. And they don't see this ending anytime soon. So, again, we're here. The crowd has been growing, and, I think this is going to continue on well into the night, as it did last night, up until well into midnight, I think. Leland?
All right, Rich, we're going to keep an eye on your camera. Obviously, stay safe, but if there's arrests that start happening, let us know. We'll come back to you. Thank you very much. Senator Ted Cruz is with us here on set. Intifada, the violent uprising against Israel. Are we clear-eyed, you think, on who these people are and what they're actually saying?
Look, unfortunately, we're not nearly clear-eyed enough. This is a radical anti-Israel, anti-American extreme. And more it is becoming the base of the Democrat Party. We are seeing these protests all over the country. We're seeing harassments at college campuses all over the country. We're seeing Jewish students targeted. We're seeing Jewish professors targeted. We're seeing university professors afraid and impotent to do anything to protect their students. And it's disgraceful.
So how do these end?
Look, I think these end when people stand up and say what's right. In the battle between Israel and Hamas, there's no gray there. It is a battle between civilization and barbarism. What Hamas did on October 7th is they went in and murdered 1,200 people. They raped women and little girls. They murdered infants. They murdered toddlers. And those monsters on the street, I'm sorry, when you were cheering, and let me be clear, I have pro-Hamas protesters at my home every Saturday morning for 3 months. They show up at 7 a.m. ringing cowbells, blowing whistles, saying the police are the KKK.
Right. So who is organizing and paying for all
Somebody's
this?
Paying for this.
I
don't know who, and I don't know. Look, the Biden administration is not going to investigate who, but it's clear many of these protesters are on somebody's paycheck. But these protesters, they hate America. Look, we saw last week video of an Iranian teaching radical left-wing protesters how to chant "Death to America" in Farsi. Understand they despise our nation. And the terrifying thing, Leland, this is not just the fringe. It's not just the Rashida Tlaibs at AOC's and the squad in the House. This is more and more the mainstream of the Democrat Party.
Really?
Yes. Chuck. So let me back that up. Let me back that up.
Okay.
Chuck Schumer on the Senate floor just a few weeks ago stood up and demanded that the elected leader of Israel be thrown out of office. He's never done that for any other country in the world except the only Jewish state. Joe Biden just 2 weeks ago orchestrated a UN resolution effectively condemning Israel for not having an immediate ceasefire. Nancy Pelosi last week signed a letter saying cut off all military funding to Israel. Biden, Schumer, and Pelosi are not the fringes of the Democrat Party. They are the most prominent elected Democrats in the country.
To be fair, okay, that's very different, okay, than what these protesters are chanting, what you just described them doing.
Is it? Joe Biden has flowed over $100 million to Iran. The Ayatollah in Iran, and this happened from day one. As soon as Biden came into office, he began undermining Israel and began giving money to the radicals. Iran, Hamas, who carried out October 7th. 90% of Hamas's budget comes from Iran. 90% of Hezbollah's budget comes from Iran. The Wall Street Journal has reported that the terrorists who carried out the October 7th attack trained in Iran. In a very real sense, Joe Biden and the Democrats funded the October 7th atrocities. And we just saw recently over 300 missiles and drones fired from Iran into Israel. And again, in a very real sense, Biden and the Democrats paid for it. Just 2 weeks ago, I forced a vote on the Senate floor. It's a very simple vote. It said that the Biden administration should no longer give billions of dollars to Iran, whose Ayatollah chants death to America and death to Israel. Every single Democrat but one voted no.
I'd be interested to know who that is.
Bob Menendez.
Okay, so that's Bob Menendez. Yeah. It wasn't John Fetterman, who has had some very, I think,
really has
had some real moral clarity and courage.
I agree.
We'll play one of his sound bites.
If Hamas would just send everybody home and surrender, all of the death, destruction, and misery in Gaza would end right now. Our office will never stop talking about this till everyone is brought back home.
And he's taken a lot of heat for keeping the posters of the kidnapped up there. Just from a political sense, is he on to something? This is a guy who was elected by working class voters in Pennsylvania. Maybe there's a vocal part of the Democratic Party that is with these folks. But when you talk to working class Americans, regardless of color, I'm not sure that this doesn't scare them.
You're absolutely right. Look, America stands with Israel. We are a pro-Israel nation. That resonates across the country. It's the radical extremes. You know, there's a joke I'm told in Jerusalem that Schumer's speech denouncing Benjamin Netanyahu was all about the two-state solution, the two states being Michigan and Nevada. Look, there's enormous truth. Schumer is terrified because in Dearborn, Michigan, you have the largest Muslim population in this country. You have radicals who are chanting death to America. These are the Democrats' base. They're terrified of them. They're a fringe, but that's not where the American people are. So is Fetterman better channeling where the American people are? Of course. And I got to tell you, I've told John, I've been astonished at the courage he's shown. I've told him, I said, thank you. But he really is standing alone. Is there not one other Democrat with the courage to stand with him? And if there is, I haven't seen him.
It's amazing that he is the one who's alone. It's really stunning, especially in the Democratic Party.
It is remarkable.
Senator, we appreciate you being here.
Always.
Thank you very much. Good to see you. The Trump trial descended even into more chaos on Friday. There was chaos on Thursday. But that will not stop opening arguments from going ahead on Monday with this trial. Maybe Democrats should have been, well, more careful about what they wished for. We'll check in on that and live pictures of Capitol Hill, where Congress is actually working on Friday. The House will vote tomorrow on aid for Israel and Ukraine. Will the Republican Speaker need another bailout from Democrats?
We just had another hearing, and the trial starts on Monday, which is long before a lot of people thought. The judge wants this to go as fast as possible. That's for his reasons, not for my reasons. And this is really a concerted witch hunt.
All right, that was President Trump looking ahead to his opening statements in his business records trial. It starts Monday. In court today, the final 5 of 6 alternate jurors were selected. So we've got 12 jurors and 6 alternates inside. Outside court today, a man, evidently with some pretty serious mental health issues, set himself on fire. NewsNation's Laura Ingle outside the courthouse now. Hi, Laura.
Hey, Leland. Yeah, it all kind of happened at the same time. We were just about to come on air and report that the jurors had been that all jurors had been selected, the 12 and the 6 alternates, when all of a sudden we heard screaming and we turned around our cameras, and right in back of us, just feet away, a man set himself on fire. Big orange flames. NYPD sprang into action. We had a press conference. The ATF was here, bomb squad, all of it. But when it all died down and everything settled down, the man is in the hospital in critical condition. We did have the business of hand of getting to Monday, getting to opening statements, and that is still the plan. So jurors have been selected. One of a Sandoval hearing happened afterwards, and that was when both sides talked about what type of evidence can be brought up about his past civil cases. The judge said, I'm going to decide on that on Monday. Then Trump's lawyers also asked to get their hands on that witness list. They want to know who's going to be called first. But prosecutors said, look, we're not going to hand over our witness list because Trump has violated the gag order repeatedly. That's also an issue that's going to be addressed next week with the judge on Tuesday, because they don't want him talking about the witnesses, possibly if he takes to his social media, or if he comes out and talks about them and disparages them in any way. They're just not going to do it. So a lot of back and forth about who's going to be called, who's going to be first. We're just going to have to wait and see until next week. And again, opening statements on Monday with most likely a higher level of security around this courthouse. Leland?
All right, Laura, thank you very much. With us now, Jim Trusty, former attorney for Donald Trump, current partner at IFRA Law. Mr. Trusty, good to see you. Is it time now to sequester this jury?
Well, there'll be some measure of sequestration. It doesn't necessarily mean they have to be shuttled off to some sort of hotel somewhere and separated from their families. They'll be told at the very least, as they were today, do not pay attention to any media, do not try to research this case in any way. I always wonder in my heart of hearts whether that has the exact opposite effect on them. So I don't know. I don't think that there's anything that's really changed the overall process where they suddenly need to be sequestered, but it's an option that the court could use.
We've seen what's happened just in the past couple of days, and quite literally every day has been crazier, including members of the jury getting kicked off the jury after they'd been put on the jury and before the trial even started. 12 jurors, 6 alternates, 6 to 8 weeks possibly of testimony. What is the chance that we actually get to a verdict versus having a mistrial between now and then?
I think there's a pretty good chance. I'll tell you what I'm worried about, and you just kind of put your finger on it a little bit. We have this culture now where jurors and even failed jurors go on TV and talk about it. And so we have this kind of celebrity juror culture. The voir dire process, the jury selection process in this case, was very quick. 4 days for a high-profile case of this magnitude is horrifying from the defense perspective. I think there's a real likelihood that there are jurors that are sleepers, that are saying to themselves, I want to be on this jury, I'm going to hide my bias. And to try to expose it in about 15 minutes of questioning from the defense attorneys is pretty tough. So I think there's a lot of mischief in this case, starting from how it even got prosecuted. I don't know that the issue is that you're going to lose jurors, because I think some of the jurors that are on could be problematic but will be determined to stay on. Whether they can all coalesce and reach a verdict after 6 or 8 weeks, which is a long time for a case of this kind of small facts, that'll be interesting, and we don't know. And we really won't have any flavor until they knock on the door with a verdict or announce that they're hung.
Okay. Yeah, I think a lot to unpack in terms of the jury selection process. I know there's already been talk about appeals. You've had to advise Donald Trump as an attorney. And like it or not, he's going to have to sit there at the defense table for weeks now and endure this testimony. We've heard the reports that he's fallen asleep. Whether that's true or not, we don't know, but those are the reports. What would be your advice to him in terms of how to act sitting at the table for the next 6 to 8 weeks?
Yeah, well, first of all, jury selection is, even when you're involved in it, it's kind of like watching paint dry. So the thought that anybody might close their eyes for a second or even a minute or two, it's pretty common stuff. But look, in terms of going forward and the guidance, I think there's a couple of things. One is, no matter how outraged you are to be on trial and at this time and under these facts, you've got to recognize that there's some risk that any sort of anger, any sort of disrespect for the court is going to bounce back and hurt you with the jurors. And that's the key here. You got 12 people. You only need 1 or 2 to hang this thing. So you've got to be on pretty good behavior to make sure they don't ever take it like you're mad at them or that you're offended by their participation in the process. So let the lawyers do the fighting. Be attentive. He's a very electric personality with a lot of energy.
You think is he that disciplined enough?
Well, we're going to find out. But look, I think he recognizes the stakes are pretty significant here, and he's got to be there every day. He's got to be on relatively good behavior. I don't think it's going to be that hard for him, but he's also just not unlike a lot of kind of C-suite white-collar defendants that you get in this world, because they're used to success. They're used to controlling everything, including the agenda of the day. And so it's a very maddening, frustrating situation to be sitting there with other people kind of controlling your fate. So I don't have any doubt he'll struggle in terms of just maintaining, his respect for a system that seems hopelessly flawed. But I think he'll also be kind of tactical enough to recognize that there's no upside to alienating the jury during this process. They're important people right now, and he's got to, show some respect for the process, even if he doesn't feel it in his heart.
Yeah, 12 most important people in America, you might say. You said he used to getting his way. He was president of the United States, the most powerful man in the world, and now sitting there at the defendant's table. Jim, thank you as always. It's good to see you.
Yeah, you too.
Yeah, thank you. Congress actually has to work this weekend to ensure Israel gets much needed funding to defend themselves against enemies on all sides, how President Biden put Republicans, specifically the speaker right there, in a box and will force them to vote on Ukraine aid too. Live pictures of the Capitol here on a Friday evening. Normally it's empty at the Capitol on Friday. Normally it's empty on Thursday, but not today. We're used to having a divided Congress, of course. Republicans and Democrats, they're here all weekend. They've got to vote. Tonight, Republicans in Congress are divided against each other. And they're going to have to vote tomorrow. President Biden's team played Republicans perfectly. They've tied $26.4 billion worth of very popular aid to Israel with $60 billion, more than double of a very unpopular aid package to Ukraine. A huge chunk of Republicans, like Representative Chip Roy, are not on board.
There is no skin in the game for the American people. We're not talking about tax increases. We're not doing anything to say that we're going to pay for this stuff as we rack up $1 trillion of debt every 3 months. But the truth is, Americans are dying, not just Ukrainians, at the hands of wide open borders, while literal hostiles flood into our country. Fentanyl pours into our streets. People are chanting death to America. And the response by Republicans is to pass a $1.7 trillion cap-busting spending bills under suspension of the rules.
Member of the Oversight and Reform Committee, South Carolina Congresswoman Nancy Mace is here. Welcome back, ma'am. It is nice to see you. This does not have the promised unicorn bill of border security for Ukraine aid. This is just Ukraine aid, Israel aid, a little bit for Taiwan. Did the White House play Republicans?
Well, Republicans got rolled by Democrats, and Republicans got rolled by fellow Republicans in this deal. We've been talking about the border and immigration and border security. In fact, Republicans passed 2 very solid border security bills last year, in H.R. 2 in May of last year, and then the Homeland Security Appropriations bills that sit in Chuck Schumer's drawer. This was a real opportunity to get something done that both sides could agree with regards to border. Brian Fitzpatrick, for example, had a very good bill that would pair Title 42 and remain in Mexico that would stem the tide of 80% of illegal crossings tomorrow if we just included that in the package that we're voting on tomorrow. But it wasn't. It was left outside of those 3 bills. And I believe the American people have every right to be pretty angry with Congress as a whole and both sides tonight.
Well, look, being angry with Congress is easy. Being angry with both sides, I guess, is easy. But at the same time, Republicans promised in 2022 to fix some of these things. And you all, God knows, have fought amongst yourselves an awful lot, right? It took a long time to get Kevin McCarthy as speaker, longer to get the current speaker picked. And yet still, I'm trying to find not necessarily a win that you sent a bill to Chuck Schumer, but a win that you forced the Senate and White House's hand. And you just said you guys keep getting played. Why is that?
Well, we should be showing our strength right now. And that means you use leverage. That means you hold the line. That means you put in border security with the foreign aid packages. But that's not what we did here. And that's why we got rolled. And, there was Republicans rolling fellow Republicans. I was involved in meetings. I spoke to many of my colleagues, and this was a lot of Washington as usual, but that's not what the American people support. And I see this as a huge fumble for the party, for the conference, especially this year when there's so much going on at the border. We had over 200,000 illegal crossings just last month alone. Yeah. But if we had done just a few things that wouldn't stir the pot too much on the left, like Title 42 and remain in Mexico, that would have made a huge difference at the southern border and was not a very heavy lift, by the way. And I believe both sides there would support it.
All right, so we're looking at the speaker right there, okay? He's your leader. You guys all voted for him, right? You were one of the ones who voted to throw Kevin McCarthy out. You brought in the new speaker. There's now 3 people who won Speaker Johnson out: Marjorie Taylor Greene, Tom Massey, Paul Gosar. If you're getting rolled, doesn't somebody's head have to roll? Does this mean that this speaker should be gone too?
Well, I mean, a lot of things happen up here where you see both parties working against its citizenry, and that's what's happening here. It's business as usual in Washington. I think a lot of people hope that was something different, and I understand the frustration. I'm still recovering from the first motion to vacate, so I'm not interested in doing this all over again. I want us to move forward,
Fair enough.
But that means we've got to be strong, and we've got to have bigger backbones, and we've got to use the leverage that we have to get some kind of border security measure to at least partially shut things down at the southern border. We had an opportunity to do that this weekend. We're not doing that. I understand the frustration, but we also need to get through this year. We need to tackle immigration every day if we have to. But the other issues that we have to address include issues related to women. We aren't doing anything for women this legislative session. And I have frustrations over those two issues. What are we doing about immigration, and what are we doing to support women? And that's where you'll see me really speak out a lot, as I always have. And asking those questions and knowing that we can do better. And I'm proposing bills on immigration, proposing bills to support women to try to move us forward. It's been very frustrating.
Well, Congresswoman, the good news is nobody ever has to wonder what your opinion is on things. You're one of the few who is willing to speak frankly, and there's a lot to be said for that. So thank you. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
And we'll talk to you soon.
Yes, sir. Have a great weekend.
Yes, ma'am. Speaking of Israel, live pictures, 2:34 in the morning, Saturday morning. Now that Benjamin Netanyahu defied President Biden and hit Iran, is Israel on its own?
To reach adulthood. That's why vaccines matter so much. For 40 years, Rotary and partners have delivered vaccines globally. Like here and even here, in your neighborhood and around the world, Rotary is ensuring children grow up safe from preventable diseases.
This is NewsNation, reporting that's down the middle. That's why we're America's fastest growing cable news network.
Snakes, zombies, sharks, heights, speaking in public. The list of fears is endless. But while you're clutching your blanket in the dark, wondering if that sound in the hall was actually a footstep, the real danger is in your hand, when you're behind the wheel. And while you might think a great white shark is scary, what's really terrifying and even deadly is distracted driving. Eyes forward, don't drive distracted. Brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
Over the last few years, things have gotten weird.
And for our kids, these things can be overwhelmingly stressful.
Scientific research
and real-life experience
tell us that the number one antidote to stress is authentic, trusted relationships.
So that's why I
am committed to building and maintaining a trusted space.
This is a trusted space.
Access free films and resources to build trusted spaces in your schools and communities at atrustedspace.org.
This summer, the Games will bring us together to celebrate our nation's athletes, their sacrifices, resilience, and unwavering passion. Because at the U.S. Center for Safe Sport, we believe athletes are defined by their journey, not the medals they win. And creating a safer stage for all levels of competition is our priority, from the practice fields in your town to the podium in Paris. Join the movement to end abuse at uscenterforsafesport.org.
More than 6 million kids in the U.S. have ADHD, and many aren't getting the support they need. At understood.org, we know that parents want to help, especially when their child has questions like,
why am I always falling behind? Why do I feel so alone?
We provide parents with the resources they need to help kids with ADHD thrive. Your child wants to thrive. Be the reason they do. Visit understood.org/thereason to get started.
Morning there right now on Saturday morning. We're waiting to see what Israel's next move will be after their overnight strike last night deep into Iran. The Israelis reportedly gave the Pentagon a heads up on the strike. President Biden, of course, had asked the Israelis to hold their fire. They didn't. Earlier today, Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre made every effort possible to distance President Biden from the Israelis.
We do not have any comment on the reports at this time. So I'm not going to speak or speculate about any of the reports that are out there. I'm not going to comment, and I'm just going to leave it there. I just don't have anything to share. I'm not going to speculate on the reportings out there. I'm not going to speculate or speak to any of the reportings that are out there at this time. I'm not going to speak or speculate to any of the events from last night. I'm just not going to speculate.
Ambassador John Bolton is with us in a minute. We start with NewsNation's Robert Sherman in Tel Aviv this evening. Hi, Robert.
Hey there, Leland. And the United States made it very clear to Israel that if they were to launch a counter operations against Iran, they would have to go it alone. And talking to people on the ground here, there's a growing fear that that's a recurring trend.
Beginning of the war with Hamas, I was happy with the American response. Recently, I wouldn't say it's been an amazing support, and it's felt like Israel has been more on its own.
Everyone in this country is very well aware of the protests that have been taking place and the geopolitical landscape in the United States. Everyone is very aware of those conversations, and that's why there is a growing fear that it's possible one day Israel may not have America's total support. But tonight, they think that and feel a bit optimistic that it may not necessarily come to that. On one side of your screen, you have Jihad Square in Tehran. On the other side of your screen, that's Tel Aviv, where the airspace has been open today. People have been on the beaches as they have hoped to see life carry on.
It's on my mind that there is a possibility of a response, but I think also letting them affect my life to an extent where I wouldn't leave the house is also letting them win.
And the reality is that heading into Shabbat tonight, there's been a lot on Israelis' minds, whether it's the war in Gaza, whether it's tensions with neighbors, or the situation in the United States. We talked to a lot of people here. What they want to focus on is, for now, celebrating the Sabbath, and in a couple of days, celebrating Passover. Leland?
Yeah, been 6 long months of war for the Israelis. Robert Sherman on duty for us in Tel Aviv. Robert, thank you. Former ambassador to the United Nations, John Bolton, obviously also served as national security advisor in the Trump administration, is with us this evening. Mr. Ambassador, good to be with you. In the past couple of minutes, there have been reports out of Iraq of some of the Iranian-backed militias being struck. Large explosions at bases there. Obviously, this is about as unconfirmed as you get, but they are out there. If it is the Israelis again, it is yet again defying the United States. Is the Biden administration risking becoming almost irrelevant in the Middle East?
Well, I think the enormous pressure that they put on the government of Israel not to respond robustly to the Iranian attack this past weekend, that has reverberated around the region. And so the message in Tehran for the mullahs there is, if you want to squeeze Israel, put pressure on the United States. So the left wing of the Democratic Party is now on notice that they can exert that pressure. I just think that the only person who may be satisfied by Israel's restraint yesterday was Joe Biden. I think it sends a bad signal to Iran. I think it sends a bad signal to Hamas. The only potential redeeming grace here is that this sort of limp attack on an air base in Iran was just the first step. That there are other steps coming. Now, whether these reports of attacks against Iranian-backed Shia militia positions in Iraq turn out to be true or not, I don't know. But those are the very people who have staged nearly 170 attacks against American military and civilian positions in Iraq. So if the Israelis are going after them, more power to them.
Yeah, there'd be quite an irony, right, if the Israelis take more action against those groups in Iraq and in Syria and the Houthis in Yemen than the United States has. Interesting thing happened overnight, right, is that the Israelis wanted to deliver an unambiguous message, which is we can reach out and touch you and hit deep inside of Iran, which was impressive in its own right, but wanted to maintain the strategic ambiguity. And you saw that, all the no comments from Antony Blinken and then all the way through Karine Jean-Pierre. Yet, last night, almost in real time before the Israeli planes got home, the U.S., unnamed U.S. officials, were confirming that there was an Israeli strike. And I'm wondering if that was intentional to throw the Israelis under the bus, or maybe even worse, if the people who were told that the Israelis were going to strike then freelanced and leaked it.
Well, I think that if the government of Israel got a promise from the United States that If the Israelis didn't say anything, the United States wouldn't say anything about the raid in Iran. They made a very bad bargain since it's so hard for us to keep a secret. But I think the real purpose of the statements by these unnamed U.S. officials yesterday was not so much to throw the Israelis under the bus, although that was a collateral effect, as to say to Iran, oh, please don't blame us. We had nothing to do with it. That's typical of the Biden administration. First, it lists the things it's not going to do, just so our adversaries know, and then it's quick to say when finally somebody does do something, it sure wasn't us. I mean, it's a bad look for the United States, and I think it hurts Israel, too.
When you mentioned, though, that there's a reasonable possibility that the Israeli strikes, certainly the Israeli strikes against Iran, are something the United States hasn't done and has said they will not. But if the Israeli strikes against the Shia militia in Iraq, possibly in Syria, maybe the Houthis, are more significant what the United States does, is there a chance, and this is sort of odd to say, I guess, but is there a chance that Israel starts replacing the United States as the policemen of the Middle East?
Well, you know, a lot of people wonder about why the Abraham Accords were signed and why relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia, even though they haven't reached full diplomatic relations, have continued to improve. And that is, I think, two things. Number one, the absolute convergence of views among Gulf Arab countries and Israel that the principal threat to their security is Iran, the nuclear program, and the terrorists. And second, particularly under the Biden administration, that the United States is feckless, that it wants to make peace with Iran more than it wants anything else. It wants to get back into the 2015 nuclear deal. It doesn't want to engage in military hostilities against Iran. It leaves the Gulf Arabs in particular hanging out, and Israel as well. So I think that convergence of perception and interest among the Gulf Arabs and Israel and others, Jordan and Egypt, will continue to increase.
What do you make of the protests in America now that have moved from ceasefire to overtly pro-Hamas, overtly pro-Iran?
Well, I think it's very disturbing, and it's a mark of, I think, the lack of effective leadership on this point, that we've got essentially close to a whole generation that doesn't remember the lessons of the Holocaust, that needs to be taught them again, and why Israel is a legitimate state, not an oppressor state, and why the enemies of Israel in this war are terrorists themselves, or in the case of Iran, not only a terrorist, but a state sponsor of terrorism. This is a war between civilization and barbarism. And the people who don't understand that need a lot more remedial education.
Diplomatically said, sir. Have a great weekend, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. You might say be careful what you wish for. The new warning from Democrats to Democrats about locking up Donald Trump.
What you're doing to him, we find eerily relatable to things that have been done to folks in our community, and it's happened for decades. There's no escaping that fact.
Welcome back. You know, your mother probably said this to you, be careful what you wish for, because you actually might get it. Democrats have been pining to see Donald Trump in a courtroom and ultimately behind bars, maybe from the moment he came down the escalator in 2015, certainly since he wanted to build a wall. Now they are actually having second thoughts about Trump in an orange jumpsuit.
But this man right here, who's their GOP, the presumptive GOP nominee, is in a position to literally get back into the White House, because what you're doing to him, we find eerily relatable to things that have been done to folks in our community, and it's happened for decades. There's no escaping that fact. And Trump pointing it out and being accurate in doing so is perhaps the height of embarrassment for the Democratic Party, in my estimation.
NewsNation contributor, Democratic strategist, LA Times contributor, former House GOP Oversight Committee advisor Kurt Bardella. Okay, segment's up. We just went through your whole resume. Stephen A. Smith wrong?
No, actually he's not. He makes a really good point. There's a reason why you're seeing, in general, President Biden's numbers with the African-American community just fall out from where he was in 2020. And part of that is this relatable feeling that many people of color in this country feel that the justice system isn't fair. And when you have Donald Trump going out there every day passing the camera saying, hey, look, the justice system isn't fair, Stephen A. is right. It's relatable.
Well, and to be fair also to Donald Trump, Donald Trump did something about the justice system for African Americans with the First Step Act.
Right.
Okay, let's play this out. Democrats would love nothing more than for Donald Trump to be convicted of a crime, right? That's the idea. Then what? You put him in jail, okay, as Donald Trump aptly put on Truth Social. We're seeing in real time a living martyr. How does that end up well for Democrats?
Well, I think you'd have to look at, and if our good buddy Scott Tranter of DDHQ were here, he would say that there is a certain segment of the Republican electorate that has said if he is convicted, that might impact how they vote in November.
Hypothetical, you know that.
I would say that to Scott Tranter next time he's here, but there were a lot of voters in the Republican primary who voted for, let's say, Nikki Haley, who said that if Trump gets convicted, that's a no-go for them. I don't think that a conviction certainly helps him politically. I think the people who feel that way are pretty much already in Donald Trump's camp anyway. I don't think there are new votes there for him to get in that conviction category.
There's a lot of people, and you look at Trump's polling, if you want to talk about polling after indictments, from the baseline, first indictment went up 16 points, then picked up a total of 30, then 36, then 40, all the way through. There's a lot of people who do not like Donald Trump, but like less, and I think you talked about it in the African American community, like less the idea of the justice system being unfair against him.
Well, I also think there's this convergence of the justice system and then the election. I think people don't like the idea that a decision can be made about how they could vote in November being taken from them. I think that's part of the resentment right now, that this is all converging at the same time.
Is there any talk in Democratic circles of we may be in danger of the dog that caught the car here?
I think that they don't quite know how any of this is going to play out, and that uncertainty and the fact that could at any point in time between now and November completely hijack the campaign. I think that's something that they are concerned about and that they should be concerned about.
Right. So in other words, it'd be a flip, right? Because Republicans caught the car with abortion. Right. Okay. And now all of a sudden between now and November, you could have Democrats catching the car with Donald Trump in jail.
If the conversation is more dominant heading into November about abortion and women's rights, Democrats will win. If the conversation is more about whether or not Trump got a fair shake at trial, that's not good for the Democrats.
All right. That actually is, like, who defines the field of battle is who wins. Mark Preston on CNN. Take a listen.
I think that if he does go into this if that were to happen, first of all, I think you would probably see civil unrest across the country, certainly in some cities. That's one. And two, politically, if I'm the Biden campaign, I don't want to necessarily see him in jail because that's just going to get people more inflamed and more fired up.
I mean, you mean civil unrest like the 2020 riots? About an unfair justice system. Just putting that out there. All right, you get the last word.
I don't think that's a helpful thing to be putting out there right now. I think that's far ahead of where anything actually is. That is sensationalizing.
You think that's one of the reasons that the judge has been pretty demure when it comes to the gag order?
Absolutely. I mean, again, this is uncharted territory. We have never been through this at any point in our history. And so erring on the side of caution, erring on the side of, what we're going to do as little as we can do to limit speech as possible is probably the right posture to take given what we're talking about. And again, there's a certain practicality element. He's running for president. He's going to say what he's going to say, and you can't really police that.
All right, Kurt, it's good to see you. As always, thank you very much. Speaking of uncharted waters, we are in uncharted waters in America. We'll look at New York if we still have the live pictures of the protests there. There are people out on the streets of major American cities, and there will be this weekend, not chanting for peace as they did during the Vietnam protests, not chanting even for a ceasefire, but actively supporting a terrorist organization that is Hamas that killed 1,200 people on October 7th and wants to kill thousands more. That's this weekend in America. I'll see you on Monday night. Here's Chris.